I'm here having coffee with my buddy Thomm Jutz, and we were talking about when you buy new gear. Like if you're a player, you understand that when you get something new, like a new guitar or a new instrument of some sort, it just kind of makes you think differently or feel differently. You might get new songs. The rest of the world doesn't understand that, but we do.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right. I mean, it doesn't just make you play differently. If it makes you play differently, it also makes you write differently if you're a writer. And I do a lot of stuff for TV and movie, and so a new piece of gear can really, or a new instrument can really inspire a whole album, you know. With instruments, it's even more extreme to me because it just can really change your creative process for a while.
There's sometimes instruments you've heard on records your entire life growing up, and sometimes you got to get something 60 or 80 years old to recreate that.
Well, I do think, especially if you want to play music that's really old music from the 20s and 30s and 40s, it's important to have, at least have experienced what those instruments sound and feel like. And to me, it's also nice to have some of them. But of course, that's also, can be a pretty bottomless pit. But I do think it's really important because those instruments have certain limitations but also possibilities that certain modern instruments might not have, and so it'll make you play differently. It makes you hear the music differently, and if you hear it differently, you'll write it differently. This is a 1922 Gibson GB, stands for guitar banjo. I got it from Retrofret in New York City. I was sort of really into Papa Charlie Jackson for a minute here, and I found out that he played one of those, and so I started looking around because I was interested in what these might sound like. And I also know that there is an instrumental on my favorite Norman Blake record. The record is called Down on a Georgia Farm. It's the one that's got Whiskey Diff, Whiskey Blind on it, and he plays an instrumental on that record called Rag Baby Jig, and he plays it on one of those. And so I got a book a couple of months ago. It's called Early Blues, and it's a cool book by Jas Obrecht about some of the earliest blues performers. And Papa Charlie Jackson there's a chapter on Papa Charlie Jackson, and lo and behold, Blake is quoted talking about this type of banjo and saying that he has one that he calls Goliath because the head is so big. It's a 14-inch head, and so I just started poking around the internet, and I sort of live on the Retrofret website quite a bit, and I saw that, and they had a video there of a New York City artist. I think her name is Emily Eisenman, playing this thing. She was playing some really weird but cool and pretty complicated classical guitar piece on this, and I was just blown away by the weirdness of the tone, because it's not really, doesn't really sound like a banjo and doesn't really sound like a guitar neither. It sounds like something from a long time ago, from a different place. It's sort of Middle Eastern sounding, African sounding. It's real easy to get around on. So I sort of got into this because I was listening to a bunch of music by Papa Charlie Jackson, who's one of the earliest male solo blues performers. He recorded for Paramount, and he played one of those. So this is a 1922 Gibson GB, stands for guitar banjo, with a 14-inch head. So it's a really big head, it's open back. This rim is hollow, and it's got a really comfortable neck like a Gibson guitar from that period would have had, but it's got that funny snake head-ish kind of headstock. But it's got pretty much unmanageable overtones, but that's kind of cool. You can control it a little bit when you put your wrist or your arm on the head a little more. But I like the weird overtones that it has. And I just got this a couple of weeks ago, so there's probably some setup work that can be done to make this play in tune a little better. And this pick guard is supposed to slide on this rod, I think, but it's not. So I got this tiny little spot here for my ring finger before I'm hitting this deal here. But anyway, Papa Charlie Jackson stuff would have maybe sounded like something like this. At the time, these were not like an excuse for a banjo like a lot of guitar banjos are today. There were virtuosos who played these. There were also the guy who played in Louis Armstrong's Hot Five played a six-string banjo for a while. So it can do a lot of different things.
Just so people know, the neck is like a guitar. It plays just like a guitar, but down here we're in banjo territory.
Yes, it's exactly like guitar. Six strings, tuned like guitar, but you can tune it differently too, and it's got an open back. So this is before Gibson built banjos with a resonator design.
We were talking earlier, and you said you could adjust the neck with this.
I think so. With this, yes, this adjusts the neck to some degree, I think.
And then we talked about the wood.
This is a hollow rim. Yes.
I can't imagine the craftsmanship that would go into bending these pieces of wood and then putting them together. And it's hollow. That's where a lot of the tone's coming from?
That's what I understand, yeah. And it's, I mean, at the time, those were not cheap instruments. A lot of the guitars from that period that we play today, like Nationals or even some of the simple Gibson models, as good as they are, they weren't necessarily expensive guitars, but these were pretty elaborately made instruments at the time, probably not cheap. But you could really cut through, and Papa Charlie Jackson didn't play like blues in the sense of Delta blues or anything like that. He was from New Orleans, so it was more New Orleans influenced. It was ragtimey stuff. It was later called hokum because a lot of the topics were kind of novelty songs. There's one in particular. I don't know if he recorded it, but as I was reading up on Papa Charlie Jackson, I came across a song called "Let Me Play with Your Poodle."
Well, they do things different down there in New Orleans.
I don't know.
So the headstock is different than what I'm used to from Gibson's. I'll get a close-up of that.
It's, I don't know if this is what's referred to as a snake head. It looks similar-ish. It's got the fleur-de-lis design here, and it's the Gibson, like the guitars from the 20s and 30s before it just was Gibson. But it's a beautiful instrument. I love looking at it. I love holding it. It's got a calfskin head on it. But it's really cool. I danced around it for a while, and I called Retro Fred a couple of times, and then I was just like, well, damn it. I think I have to buy it. I think that the neck has been refinished, which for serious collectors would probably be sort of a detriment, but I'm not that kind of I'm not a collector. I'm not rich enough to be a collector. I like to just have instruments.
Yeah.
When I buy something like this, I try to justify it by making an album with it that needs that sound. And my friend Finn Goodwin Bain and I, we just made an 8-song album for Sync Company that we do a lot of work for. That's sort of early blues, ragtimey kind of stuff. And I couldn't have made it without this. So in my own twisted way, I justified the purchase that way. But I'll pay for it at some point. It's just going to take a little while. Full disclosure, it's a little bit of a pain in the rear to tune. I think there's still some setup work that can be done to make this tune a little bit. Although it's pretty cool, and the way it is, and it's got the overtones are so extreme that it's somewhat forgiving in terms of being out of tune but not out of tune.
It's got character.
For sure. I mean,
that's really all I ask for out of music.
Yeah, I mean, it oozes character to me, and it does something that I have an open back 5-string banjo, but that's a totally different animal. This is just the low notes that come out of that are just really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Well, this is this. I don't know. It's such a unique sounding instrument. I think you can play a lot of stuff on it, and it'll just end up sounding sort of between the worlds. It's sort of doesn't really sound like guitar. Doesn't really sound like a banjo neither. It's somewhere in between. It sounds from like it's something from a long time ago. This is Fair and Tender Ladies.